Good evening, everybody. We're just going to give everybody else about a couple of minutes to join, and then we can start the webinar.
Subhash, maybe we get started.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. We are here to discuss or talk about prioritizing features in products. All of us have been involved with developing products at some or the other point of time. And one of the things that we commonly have as an experience is as the product grows and as the user base and functionalities increase, we have a problem of too much and too many to do in a very small amount of time. We're going to talk about how to analyze the situation, understand where you are from a product cycle point of view, and think about what should be done first and what should be done second in terms of feature sets, in terms of understanding which users should be targeted, etc. We have Sinu with us today to walk us through this whole thought process, and we'll also hopefully understand how to go about using this process in our daily life, in our current work, in the products that we're building right now. Sinu, over to you. Please help us understand what product planning is, first of all.
Thank you, Subhash. Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So let's actually dive straight into this. Hope you can hear me well. And if you cannot hear me well, type now so I know to stop and adjust something. So the product planning, as per Wikipedia, is the ongoing process of identifying and articulating market requirements. This is a part of a longer definition, and there are many types of definitions. But the primary thing that we deal with here is we know as you are developing a product, you are bombarded with different directions, different strategies, different priorities and concerns and complexities. And we are always asked to prioritize. Tell me why, and tell me why now, tell me why how. So that is organizing them is product planning. So what do we talk about in this webinar? We will talk about this in 2 or 3 short webinars. What we want to focus on is how do you methodically build an effective roadmap? How do you deal with conflicts in prioritizing what you need to develop? How do you evolve product on a ladder that leads to success? Not just keep churning features out, not continue to build, but how do you actually know we're doing the right things that are leading to the success, which actually builds confidence? That's the reason for the title. So what are we not going to talk about? In some parts of the marketing world, people combine the entire exercise of developing business case, a part of product planning. We're not talking about developing a business case of analyzing the market size and shaping the requirements, and we're not doing that. We are also not touching in this short webinar how do you initially develop the marketing requirements before you actually start this exercise, and how do you actually write down product requirements. We actually talk about the live process, the dynamic process of engaging with the entire development team as well as the stakeholders in developing a product plan and staying true to making the product a success. Why is this an important topic? We get so many questions so many times. If you look at a product manager, they almost seem to have a dual personality. A person managing the product always feels like, oh, I'm the president of this product or the company. I make all the decisions. At the same time, you get so much frustration. I am drowning in the backlog. Every time I go to the development team and say, can you do this feature? They come back and say why they cannot, why they have a million things to do, whether it is fixing the pending bugs or some other urgent feedback or some architectural upgrade, all kinds of things that take up the entire capacity of the development team, leaving no room for features. The numbers are staggering. And sometimes, as a product reaches a particular stage, let's say you've been at development for a year, two sometimes, and you have achieved the initial launch into the market, you achieved certain success. So when you start out the entirely new product, you have certain idea of what it should do at a launch time. So you really haven't thought through what you do afterwards. So the product gets into a plateau, and then the fun begins. The whole team starts exercising on how do we take it to the next plateau? How do we actually grow? And there will be so many ideas, so many experiments from different stakeholders, conflicting priorities, and product management team will go totally into a flustered mode. And then the other mode there, product management, product teams are always under pressure and say, hey, I gave you so many people, and we know what we want, what will make us successful. How come I can't have it all now? I want you to go and develop everything. And we have the other thing. As a product is growing, as maturing, the complexity of the product sometimes grows non-linearly. And every time you want to add a little feature, let's say at the beginning of the product, when it's really lightweight, you may get a turnaround and say, hey, half a sprint or one sprint, 1 week or 2 weeks we can give you. As the product grows, after a few quarters of time, calendar time, you ask for the same feature, they will say, oh, it's going to take 1 month, 2 months. That's because of the complexity that increases with bad product planning. So if you're in any of these situations, I think it's time to take just a breather and look at where you are. So what's the good thing if you do a good product planning? You can actually grow the product and the team very effectively and efficiently. And you always meet at any stage of the product development, you are always connected to the business goals, to the strategic goals, and you're always connected to the development team and their concerns. So a good product planning achieves that perfect bridge and never deviates from what you are really expected to deliver. If you're doing that, by the way, you're truly the president of the product. You make the calls. Actually, you do it for a while. Afterwards, even if you're not doing a really great job, people trust you so much. It seems so intuitive, seems so simple, yet so difficult in practical sense. And to manage that sync between business plan and development plan, there are many schools on the internet as well as real schools that teach you how do you deal with a product team, how do you deal with a sprint, how do you need to do some business analysis, spreadsheet analysis, etc. We feel those things are pretty homogeneous in how they address every single sprint in the product. But a really good product plan, when done, actually achieves that sync by being sensitive to the situation and being sensitive to the status of the product. What else does a good product plan deliver? So in this new data-driven world, if we have done good product planning, it will give us so much insights. We can go back and say, hey, how many how many use cases have we done that actually have helped the users? How many use cases we really had to rewrite code for? By the way, how efficient have we been on different metrics? What is the real wastage? By the way, there is an estimate that about $20 million get wasted every 2 seconds or so with product design and developments in the world. So it's a staggering number. So good product planning gives you a stance, information to do confident prioritization, minimize waste, and keep you in sync with the business goals. So that's what we want to facilitate. Of course, we're not going to achieve all of that in the next 20 to 30 minutes, but we're going to give a structure that helps us deal with this problem in a methodical fashion. By the way, if you have any questions at this point, please, type, interrupt as you feel free. So who do we deal with? So one of the things we do in our webinars is not treat the entire product team and every single role with a broad brush, with a homogeneous treatment. So different parts of product team get concerned with different things. When it comes to product planning, it really impacts the business managers most. Business managers, sometimes people call product owners, whoever is in charge of taking that responsibility for the business goals of the product. And product managers who are in the toughest seat, always having a list of priorities and defending them before they are developed, while they're being developed, and after they are developed, justifying and say why you're right. And finally, if you're in a big company, etc., the project management office, they have, some of them are still stuck in the 1960s, managing waterfalls. How many lines of code are you going to write, etc., kind of methodologies, to some of the new ones where they don't really know what they're asking for. So it gives them a metric, because now you can ask questions at a business level and say, have we achieved what we should have achieved? And doing that in the middle of a product development cycle, needs a structure. So they are the people that we think it will most immediately helps. And as now the software products are coming into more of a so-called mass market, we all need to be concerned about how to develop products. We are trying to demystify how do you develop a complicated new software product or a more sophisticated software product without getting a PhD in a project or a product management discipline or software discipline, etc. We all, anybody with common sense, must be able to reliably participate in a development team and development project and get the project done. So that is our goal, and that's what we aim to do here.
Thank you, Sino. That's quite a bit. Who knew, right? Product planning could be so complex. But yeah, just kidding, we all know. One of the most important points that you touched upon, apart from it being something that needs to be accessible to the layman, to everybody who builds products, is also the fact that it's an ongoing process. There's no end to it. There is always something that, if left alone, tends to cause chaos in the product planning cycle. You need to always be on the job trying to figure out what is of higher priority, and you try to keep pruning that backlog, keeping features in check and understanding what should be done next. Thank you for that introduction. Now, that spiked the interest up. Can you please walk us through an actual product planning process? How does one go about doing it from a product point of view? Let's say you have a product which has too many features to be built, what approach would one take to segment and decide what's the next thing that needs to be picked up?
Yeah, absolutely, Subhash. So we have covered why this is an important topic. As you clearly said, it's not a one-time thing. You don't do it when you start a project and say, I have done my product plan. I published 40 pages of roadmaps and a 5-year plan, like a Russian strategic plan or something, and I'm done. It is a living, breathing exercise. You're engaged in it as long as the product is alive and you are as part of the team. So let's take an approach that worked for us successfully in many projects and where we continue to see good results coming out of following a certain approach. Just for introduction, between Subhash and me, we have decades of experience in building sophisticated products for our own companies as well as some other customers, and we have done our share of mistakes. Please make no mistake about it. We did not start with this and say we were born with, hey, we're gifted with this approach. Nobody else knows this. Not at all. This is an empirical approach we have settled on after practicing all the best practices from Silicon Valley, after going through all the theory. We both have degrees in computer science, using all that and said, we really need to simplify. We need to modernize and find an approach that really works for us. So let's dig into this without further intro into it. The number one thing I say about is, before you actually do product planning, you have to know where the product is. So it's kind of a context sensitive approach to product planning that determines what actually you do. If you don't take anything else from this webinar, I say this: don't jump into a product team or a project and say, I'm going to do product planning with this approach, which is a homogeneous approach, without taking into context where you are and what the dynamics of the product team are. So this is the point. So what is a product status? So if you take a product life cycle and divide it into 4 stages, everybody divides into some stages, and these are the 4 stages that we like for the reasons that will follow. And you can name them whatever else, and others have named them whatever else. So those concepts are the following. So when you start out, you want to build a system that solves a particular business problem. So the first thing to do is a proof of concept. Everything you do to build a system that actually de-risks the core tenets is called a proof of concept. So you define a milestone. I need to hit a proof of concept. Why is that important? Until you eliminate the risk, until you show that there is viability in doing the project, you should not be investing and doing more work and prioritizing and thinking about all the finer details of the product. And once you do that, the second step is, you must all have heard this enough times until you've gone deaf, that we need to achieve a product market fit. How do you achieve a product market fit? You only know after you achieve a product market fit, not before. So building a minimum viable product is a big part of it. So that's the next step. What's a minimum viable product? It's actually a real product, and a product that actually solves a customer's problem to the extent that the core tenant, core value proposition is proven. You don't need all the bells and whistles and all the integrations and address 4 different continents and all that stuff. After that, you build the next stage as a minimum revenue product. What's the minimum revenue product? This is what customers are actually willing to pay money for. Hey, you know what? I'm actually going to put it to real use. I actually will change my working behavior, my workflow, or whatever I need to do, and plug this into my process. I'm willing to pay for it. If it is a subscription of $100 a month per seat, or if it is one time $2,000, whatever it is, I'm willing to pay to use that. But that may be in a one specific market, only a few personas, and a sub-segment of all your market segments, such as, let's say you're targeting a product for small, medium business, large enterprise, something else. Maybe you only pick one market to say, I can actually build a product people are willing to pay money for. Then you go to the final one. But the final one is a scaling product. What does that do? It actually addresses all the markets that are relevant, that have been identified in the business plan, because you have invested in this project to achieve a business goal, and the scaling product must hit all those metrics to go achieve that. If we build this, you need to identify where are you, because the problems are different for product planning. What you do to actually do a good product plan depends on where you are. So if you are in the first stage, proof of concept, you actually put your blinders on and put your cotton in your ears, and you are focused on one thing. That is, I need to de-risk the core tenant so that we can confidently move to the next stage. On the other hand, let's say you are in stage 4. You have priorities that are driving you fundamentally, such as what? Hey, my service costs and my customer sat metrics must be met before I add more markets or more integrations are done, before I extend the product. If you don't, you lose more money with every unit you sell. Every user adds more problems than add profitability to you. So your priorities are determined by where are you. The other dimension that happens here is the product teams change from the beginning to the end. Some of you who are on this webinar, I know a few, you're in small companies and small teams, etc. So when you are at the beginning of a product in the proof of concept, your team is very small. Maybe you have one or two developers, maybe you have one product manager, maybe when your CEO walks into the product planning meetings, it's all very small. So your dynamics and how you prioritize is very different. It's a rapid decision making, and everybody is involved in everything, more broader approach. As you go scale up, the team may break up into multiple teams. You may have just maintenance, sustenance team as a part of your product team. So your priorities are more deeper in nature than broader. Engagement is deeper. The approach is different. So you really need to know before we take on the methodology where you are. This is really key. Not take a broad brush and approach product planning, but to realize where you are and identify. So we have listed here, and this material is available on our website. We'll email you. So if you are in one of these stages, whether it's POC or MVP or revenue or scale, you have a goal. Either de-risk, number one. In the second stage, go hit product market fit. Third stage, go to market fit. And then basically your entire model to market fit. You have your goals. And the strategies will depend on what they are. And your scenarios are dependent on them, and you need metrics to be successful. Why is this important? You actually have to start out with this. You define the goals before you do something, not after you have done something. So those will keep us make all the decisions underneath so confidently. And the process itself ties the business metrics to strategy metrics taken from the business plan all the way to the nitty-gritty details of prioritizing. We can almost make a use case and say, don't fix this bug. We can live with this bug. You know why? Because 1% of the users used, and they are non-critical. We have the analytics. So we have identified certain metrics that we always kind of ask. And by the way, these are, we cannot fit an entire book into a chart. Use this as a guideline, as a high-level helping tool to plan. But the idea here is you need to identify what are your metrics for the current stage and what is the goal that I am trying to do, and identify fill. You need to have a placeholder. So before I move on, one more point I'd like to make about this. In one of our previous webinars, it is called Living Documentation. Everything and anything we do, and that is anybody in the product team, becomes actually a part of the documentation for the product. Documentation is never separate. So as you go document, as you follow these templates and write that, it is going to save you tens, if not hundreds of hours of work answering questions later to both your stakeholders and the development team. In fact, they won't even come to you. A lot of times when somebody asks for a feature, development team goes back and forth. What do you really mean by that? What is it achieving for you? Do you really mean by this? Not that. So it becomes a lot of work. That goes away. So if you invest a few hours into this, and by the way, my recommendation when you do this, involve the stakeholders. It's not something for you to do and say, I'm the president of the product, I'm going to do this. This is done with the stakeholders. If we have invested a few hours in it, we can pretty much assure you, you are going to reap the benefits at a 10x or a 100x returns on this one. And this eliminates half the confusion on the product plan. So I just want to touch upon one point before we move on. That is, let's say in the scenario, what drives you to actually scratch your head about product planning could be somebody challenges you, hey, we're stuck in this at this stage, and we know we have 3 or 4 plans. We need to expand to that market segment. Otherwise, we won't have enough revenues to satisfy our stakeholders. At the same time, the current segment is asking for more in-depth features, more completeness, Otherwise, they are not going to stay with the product and the usage falls off. Both of them are number one priority. So what are you going to do about it? So we will deal with that situation in the subsequent slides. So this is a must do in our opinion at the beginning, and there will be later a short webinar on just working on this template. So once you identify what stage you are in, you have to break up in this product life cycle into that stage into multiple phases. Why is that? You really do not want to take a 3 month or a 6 month stage. Let's say it takes about 6 months, maybe 9 months to an MVP. You cannot put the whole team in a cave and say, go in there and come back when the MVP is done. That is a sure way to fail. We really think you have to break it up into phases, because even within those phases, from one phase to the other, how you approach product planning changes. So when you are doing the stage level planning at the top red bar, you are more strategic in nature. You involve different stakeholders. And when you move to the phase level, it is a more of a combination of strategic and tactical level planning. The stakeholders, the higher level stakeholders go away. It involves more other stakeholders, the architects and whatnot. And by the way, once that is identified, each phase breaks into multiple sprints. That becomes more tactical per se. Uh, and how we approach product planning really goes into prioritizing one Jira ticket over the other almost. So the nature of our product planning approaches, when you do this, so realize what it is. In some companies, in some teams, they actually identify different product managers. They have various crazy titles of all kinds. They call them inbound product manager, outbound product manager, strategic product manager, tactical product manager, technical product manager, business product manager. So what we believe is that irrespective of those categorizations and that kind of staffing, it is useful to know the setup, the nature of how the product line comes in, so that even if you do only one part of it, you know what the other part is doing. It really becomes useful for even people not involved in product planning to know what goes on here. So now, how do you break up a stage into different phases? So you actually have to avoid taking too big development tasks. So the reason is you won't know you are successful or you have failed until you hit it. So you don't want 6 months to go by without knowing how you are moving forward. That's the primary reason. Remember, the title is how do you confidently keep moving towards product planning? Every step of the way, the product planning you must be confident about. You must be confident about that product is going to succeed. And then you identify 2 or 3 meaningful milestones, not too many. Don't identify 20. It's not useful. Identify key meaningful, and these milestones at a phase level are both at a business level, they can relate to it, as well as meaningful technological milestones as well. And then take up each milestone and focus on that with, again, putting the blinds on and putting the cotton in your ears. We got to dig deeper. So here is another key point. We talked about the first one as the main point to take away from the webinar was you need to know what the status of the product is. And to do that, we took an approach on product lifecycle or a development lifecycle, and we use that as a reference point. The second most important thing in this webinar is, or for product planning, is so what drives your product prioritization? We talked about earlier. You have 2 different priorities. One, user community is asking for more completeness, more features, or extensions of features, and the business guys are asking, you need to deliver me the other segment. So what are you going to do? So you will have a lot of conflicts. So these are the guidelines that will ensure you are moving in the path of making the product successful. So let's focus on them. This is really, really key. Even if we run out of time, don't talk about other things, I would be happy just to talk about this. Focus on what the outcomes are. What are the outcomes we want? And so move away from somebody gives you a list of features and say, I need you to do this, this, this. Wait a second. I will give you them. If I gave you, what outcomes will come? So the right question to ask at any given time is, what are the outcomes. Please tell me what outcomes you want. Do not tell me what feature. Maybe putting a search bar on this page gives you that, or maybe a different mechanism gives you that. We'll go figure out that one. We'll go do some analysis and do that. But tell me the outcome. And the second thing, trade on scope. So, for example, if at an MVP level, right, you deliver a feature, it is testing a particular hypothesis, it is delivering a goal, it is proving if you really have a product market fit, etc. You can spend 80% of all your resources completing the last 1%, 2%. By the way, as soon as you complete it, that 1%, 2% extends. It never really reaches the end. So focus and trade on the scope of what is it in terms of prioritization. And the next one, you always map. You never have a feature. You never even have a small thing that teams need to focus on without identifying, without kind of which value proposition is it supporting. In fact, as a product manager, I challenge you. Anything, take a random one. You must be able to tell me immediately without having to dig through your documentation, talking with 10 people, which use case does this belong to? Which persona is impacted by it? Which value proposition is it mapping to? Which hypothesis is proven by it? Which business goal, whether it is revenue or profitability or market share or competitive, which one is it addressing? You must be able to answer that. Is there a way to do it? Absolutely. We're going to talk about that briefly, but it is possible. So what do you want? You don't want to with the lead list and say, my competitors have these features. Oh, I must have these features because my competition has. Who cares? In fact, you don't want anything they have because there's a reason you're starting to do something new, not doing what they're doing. So what is we do? We actually focus on hypothesis validation because that leads to success. That's always the first step. And don't deal with the feature just because somebody wants it. One of the stakeholders, somebody's fancy, without substantiating with validation. These are our guidelines that prioritize it. And if you don't have anything else, if you want to take a broad brush and take best practices to apply at any given stage, whether it is a stage level, phase level, sprint level, just take this list and go apply. You will still have already improved your process by about 20, 30%.
Thank you, Sinu. Yeah, so even though one of the slides had too much of information on how each stage is identified and prioritized, most of it is sound advice and common sense. And it's also important to actually break it up large goals into smaller pieces. Again, that is just sound advice. If you're not hitting your goals 2 weeks or 4 weeks at a time, then there's a very small chance that you'll hit a goal that is 6 months away or 1 year away. So thank you for walking us through that. We are going to now next walk through a concrete example of how to go about doing this. Over to you, Sinu.
Yeah, thank you, Subhash. We're going to build an example, and we're not going to build a whole product in the next 5-10 minutes, but we're going to do an attempt at how would you approach. So hopefully this example helps us to approach it, even if you're beginning a brand new product with a clean sheet, or you just jump into it. You've been hired in or you're brought into and say, this is an ongoing train, jump in and, hey, by the way, where is my product plan? It doesn't matter. So hopefully we'll cover both very briefly. And we plan to have all this reference material on our website. And by the way, if you have any questions, you can ask, or you can even later on, all of you know us, and an email and call, any which way. We're just happy to help. So let's take an example. Let's build an example. Let's build a system that automates a proposal generation. What's the proposal generation? You have a department, let's say it's a capital intensive industry, and you do a lot of proposals for your customers constantly. And you, as a business manager, you notice, hey, I'm reinventing the wheel every time. Some customer asks for a proposal, and I find the different people to contribute some content for it, and I go put it together, and I go send it. Let me think about this. How come we don't use some content already written for similar proposals before and do this? How come every time we're running around spending so many man hours doing these proposals? So now I want to go build a product to go change that. So you have built at this level a business case. You have identified and say, hey, my revenues are 100 million. I have so many thousands of people working on it, whatever, or hundreds of people working on it. Now I need to improve the profits by so much. And here is the opportunity. You have a thesis, you have a business plan, and then you go get started. So we're not dealing with that at this point. So where do we go from here? We go and identify 4 stages. The first one is we need to build a proof of concept for a product. Then we need to build an MVP to see. First one is we need to de-risk. What is the risk? Actually, that my concept itself is the risk. The concept that if I reuse material from the previous proposals and give it to the proposal manager, it is going to save them time. And what's the technology side of the risk? It is actually possible for the technology to pick up pieces of material from previous proposals and give it to a proposal manager without a lot of effort. The technology can do that. I don't know either thing. I'm a business manager. So I'm going to ask the team and say, go ahead. I give you so much money or whatever, first stage, prove that this concept has legs and there is no risk in the core tenants. Then I can invest, a lot more dollars to go for a longer term plan. That's a proof of concept. You need to do it. So whether you do it using real technology, for the technology piece, you need to show the piece of technology that works. But for the whole concept, it can be handwritten notes. It can be what people call a wireframe. It can be something you take pictures of with your mobile phone and show. It does not matter. You have to prove for your own sanity and for the business sanity that the concept is validated. Anything else you do at this point is too risky and may waste your time. Once you have done that, there's a minimum viable product. You need to actually show that you can put a team together and you can actually build something and you give it to somebody, a real product in this case. Sometimes you don't need a real product, and I will talk about that at some stage. Real product, it does not have all the bells and whistles. It does not have all the integrations. It does not work with your SharePoint, your personal desk, some other cloud, and all that stuff, Dropbox, and all that. It actually takes, you give it 100 proposals. It takes the material, it shows to a proposals manager, and it actually works and says, I can put together a new proposal by click, click, click. I have done that. It took me only 2 hours instead of 4 hours. Voila. When can I have it? By the way, the first question, if they like it, how much does it cost? You're going to get that. And that is basically product market fit. And you need to show it with enough people, not just your best friend telling you and say, yeah, or somebody organizationally challenged and say, I just want to make friends with this product manager. I want to say, I like it. None of that. So it really good. So then you go to minimum revenue product, where you actually build a complete product, but only one of the different market segments you're targeting. If the product involves different personas, we haven't talked about personas here, but it's a different webinar. What's a persona? Different sets of users. You only take a subset of the number of users or the types of users you are addressing. So if you are talking about different size customers, take one particular one. If you're talking about different verticals of industries, you only take one. So build a minimum revenue product, but that's more complete, but in its market reach is narrow. What is the point of that? We really need to prove that some of the marketing mix that are a part of the business plan need to be de-risked. Are we on the right track? If we build this product, can I actually build a profitable product line on it? Not that, oh, I can build, some people are willing to pay, but you know what? With every unit, I'm going to lose money. So that cannot be at this stage. Or, hey, I thought I had a business case. If everybody paid $100 per seat per month, people want to pay $2 per month per seat. Something wrong. So we need to figure out what's going on here. It is possible that you have actually not done MVP well. But anyway, once you do that, the minimum scale product, we think in this case and say, okay, I need to really make sure now the business case might have called for, oh, if I can sell it to 1,000 customers in these 4 different verticals across these geographies with minimum support, with only 2 people supporting, etc., this is a really profitable business, or I'm going to get so much ROI. Those things need to be done. They drive the product roadmap at that stage, those priorities must be taken into consideration. For our example, we're going to focus on the MVP part of it and actually build out in subsequent webinars more fully. So by the time you have reached MVP, this is what you have already achieved in the POC. You have de-risked the key concept. You have de-risked the key technology. That is, you can pluck out key content components from different prior proposals and you can assemble them. And you have identified clearly what the use case is. The use case in this case for us is a particular proposals manager looking at there's a new request for a proposal, can look at it and immediately has a lot of the content automatically filled in from the prior proposals. This is a bigger use case and it gets broken into my subsequent, smaller use cases, but it's a primary use case. So you already identify the personas. You don't worry about who manages the system yet, administrate all that. Pick one, proposals manager. Don't worry about others. Because if they don't agree that the concept has value and we're saving them something, and that is the primary persona in the business case who we actually charge money, then everything falls apart. So you identify. So we already have done that in PS. And from there, you actually are going to the proof point and say you already have proven the two things that we talk about here. I'm not going to repeat. And they say, absolutely, this will add value. If you can finish this product and give it to me, I will use it. I'll prove it to you, I'll use it. So you have done that. So we go to MVP. Then what do? Here is the fun begins. We actually are going to do in the next 2 webinars or so, the real product management work of doing product planning. So let's take the value proposition here. What's the value proposition? I can deliver a new proposal in half the time of what you were taking before we build this product. Great. We must do this in the MVP. We're going to do it. So what's the hypothesis here? The hypothesis is that we're going to do that, save half the time by doing 2 things. One is we're going to eliminate a repetitive work you do. And second thing is we're going to also not reinvent the wheel, reuse the content from previous one. Those 2 together are going to deliver 50% of time savings. That's our hypothesis, which we must go translate into a detailed roadmap. So we take goals. The goal is, hey, I need to have product market fit. Otherwise, the product is not going to move forward and we must achieve it. Even if you have achieved a good portion of hypothesis and value proposition, achieving a product market fit is a requirement before you actually build bells and whistles and finer details of UX and integrations and expansions. So what's the second goal? We must actually achieve, even if you have not achieved the product market, you must achieve reducing the repetitive work and reuse of content, because that's the hypothesis which will lead to the value prop. So the priorities for this particular segment of the product or stage of the product become, hey, we need to pick one segment, focus on one segment, not all of them. And my priorities are focus on the automation, and that means I need to identify the repetitive work and eliminate it. It's a priority. And the other priority is I must reuse content. That's my priorities. Now, how do we translate this into a detailed roadmap? So here is where we actually take that and we have a process. So now, one of the previous webinars we have done, so 30-minute webinar, talks about event modeling, or how do you without missing, in a bullseye approach, communicate the requirements. So I highly recommend you take a look at it on our website. And I'm going to briefly talk about without doing the whole work, because we want to finish this whole webinar in 45 minutes. So first thing we do is develop events. You identify what should happen or what would have happened in this stage, and identify different events. The different events are things like a proposal is received, proposal is submitted, the content is assembled. That's an event. Each of them is an event. Once you do them, you put them on it like a timeline. First this happens, next this happens, next this happens. And what is the result of that? You can do it on a whiteboard, you can on your notebook, nothing fancy. You don't need a PhD, you don't need anything. All you need is a bunch of common sense and people willing to work with you. And then you have a storyboard. What does the storyboard have? Basically, the 2 things we talked about. You have the events, what happens or what happened in this stage, at what time and before what event and before after what event. That's just the sequence of things. Once you have the storyboard, which is explained in that other webinar, once you have the storyboard, this basically translates into who is impacted and what is going into this event, what is coming out of it, basically input, output, and for who. So this translates into what many developers and product managers, they all realize as Jira tickets. Just let's call them tickets right now, or tasks. For the ease of plain, simple language, you can task. By the way, there are epics and stories and all that, but for the brevity here, I'm going to say bunch of tasks. So at the end of the day, you'll have a list of, here are my tasks. This is basically what happens. One task is, oh, the proposals manager received a request for a new proposal. Another one is the key attributes of new proposal are identified. Who is the customer, what's the topic, etc. Another task is something, is a list of them. Once you have a list of them, the key thing we suggest, this is team 8, we have copyrighted, think of it as copyrighted or uniqueness. This is an empirical, practical one that we have come up with. I don't think anybody else talks about this, is identify each of the tasks with the bottom left-hand side of the corner, what we have. Tag them. Today, no matter what you're doing on social media, even in your email websites, you tag everything. Why are we not doing it here? Tag every ticket. What do you tag with? The things we talked about. Where does this come from? Why do we have this? Why do we have this ticket or task? We have it because it needs to validate this hypothesis. We have this because we need to deliver this goal. We have this from this value proposition, this goal. So if you tag them, even if a subset of these three, one or two, what you have is a beautiful system where all your tasks are perfectly tagged. Why? So that one day, if you want, you can actually look at, can you tell me how many tickets went into delivering this goal? How much effort went into it? Or you can even go back and do and say, which ones are used? We put in 80% of our development work into this, but only like 2% of the users using this. You have a lot of stuff that is mapping your user analytics, usage analytics, and the business results to the detailed work, including how much is wasted, etc. That is pretty much what will help you do a data-driven product management. You can be so confident once the data supports what you're planning, which you use for the future perfect roadmap. After every stage, you do some analytics. After every phase, you do this analytics based on the tags. You can do it every month, whatever you want. You can do it because that will work, help the project management office to say, okay, this is the one we supported for the business case. These guys are doing this. For the stakeholders, each stakeholder can see they're being addressed, and you actually have a scientific way of doing product planning. So let's put it all together. Let's wrap up what we discussed. You first need to know what stage you are in. What is the status of the product? If you don't do that, don't apply a homogeneous product planning brush to it. Then understand your goals. What are the business goals? What are the technical goals? And then you translate them using the method we talked about. And again, you don't need a degree in product management, or you don't need to be technically savvy. You don't do anything. You just identify the priorities coming from the stakeholders and coming from the team and coming from the users, identify the priority and tag them. If you have done that, you have done more than 99% of the product managers, and you have done outstandingly building up to the success of your product.
Thank you, Sinu. There's also another aspect that comes in, which we have seen in our own products, right? Not only is it data-driven, but over a period of time, you can look back at how the product evolved when you tag it with this system. Maybe the same goal that you thought could have been achieved in a certain way did not work out 2 years ago. But over a period of time, you lose this information. And when you tag each feature that was built in the system in such a manner, it's possible at least to go back and read it like a story. What did we do first? How did we improve? What actually worked is something that gets outlined by looking at these tag-based structures. Thank you so much for walking us through up the ideal product planning process. We have been conducting some polls as the webinar progressed. But please reach out to us whenever you have any question or need clarifications on whatever we have discussed today. Specifically, if you want to talk more about what stage your current product is in, if you want to derive the primary goals of this current stage and want to deep dive into that discussion, always willing to get into a meeting and discussion and talk about it.
Sorry, Subhash. To actually get something out of it, please apply any of it to what you are doing, and would be so thrilled that we actually uh, think our material has become useful. Please identify. You can type it in the chat. You can type it in your notes. Do anything or mentally note it down. Please think about where exactly is your product. By the way, you'll be surprised. Why is he asking these basic questions? 70% of the product managers don't know if they have done an MVP, if they achieved a PM, product market fit, or if it's already a scaling product, they do not know. So please think about where you are and think about what the current goal should be or is for your product, and what your current challenge is. And if you actually share with us in the chat, if we can help, please do, or just please think for yourself. Sorry, Subhash, for interruption, but I just felt so important that if you don't use it, it just is theory.
All good, Sinu. Thank you so much, and we'll call it the end of this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us for this webinar. Hope to see you guys again in the next few webinars. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Subhash.